This is the story of a legendary sniper, a man so skilled that even with his eyes blindfolded, he could eliminate a target from miles away. But before he became a sniper, he was nothing more than a simple math teacher. He despised war, hated weapons, and never wanted to be anywhere near violence. Yet, one tragic event in his life transformed him from a humble teacher into a ruthless marksman. Our story begins in a small village in Ukraine, where we see a modest little house. Inside that house lives a happy couple. The man's name is Nikola, and his wife's name is Nastia. Nastia is an artist. She carves wood and shapes it into beautiful statues. Nikola is a teacher. He works at the nearby school, teaching math to children. He's an excellent teacher, and all the kids love him. At home, Nikola and Nastia don't even own a television or any electronic devices. Because of that, Nikola rarely knows what's happening in the outside world. But one day at school, he hears the shocking news on TV. Russia has launched a full-scale attack on Ukraine. Many soldiers have been killed, and Russian forces are rapidly seizing Ukrainian territories. That evening, Nikola returns home. There, he learns something that fills him with joy: his wife is pregnant. The couple celebrates the news, overjoyed at the thought that Nikola will soon become a father. The next morning, Nikola says goodbye to his wife and rides his bicycle to school, ready to teach his students. But on the road, he notices something unusual. Two soldiers are standing nearby, smoking cigarettes and wearing strange uniforms. Their outfits don't resemble Ukrainian uniforms at all. For a moment, Nikola feels uneasy, but he convinces himself that maybe the government simply changed the uniforms, and hurries to school. When he arrives, the building is eerily empty. Not a single child has shown up. Confused, Nikola turns on the TV inside the school, and what he sees chills him to the core. The news confirms that Russian soldiers have already crossed into Ukraine, seizing towns and villages by force. Suddenly, Nikola realizes, the men he saw on the road weren't Ukrainians. They were Russian soldiers. Fear grips him. His wife is home, alone. Without wasting a second, he jumps on his bicycle and races back. But he's too late. When Nikola reaches his house, he sees those same soldiers viciously beating his wife. Nikola tries desperately to protect her, but the soldiers overpower him and beat him as well. Through blood and pain, Nikola begs them, pleading, "Please, don't hurt her. She's pregnant." But the soldiers don't listen. They keep hitting them mercilessly. Then, one of the soldiers storms into the house, searching for valuables. Finding nothing, his rage explodes. He sets fire to Nikola's home. Flames consume everything. Seeing her home burning, Nastia can't contain her fury. She picks up a stone and hurls it at the soldiers in anger. Enraged, one of them raises his weapon and pulls the trigger. A single gunshot ends Nastia's life instantly. Nikola collapses. The world slips away beneath his feet as he watches his wife die before his eyes. He runs to her, holds her lifeless body in his arms, and breaks down in uncontrollable sobs. Hours pass in silence. Finally, two Ukrainian soldiers arrive. When they see Nastia's body, grief fills their faces. They place a hand on Nikola's shoulder and tell him not to lose hope. Then, they begin digging a grave. When the pit is ready, they tell Nikola softly to lay his wife to rest. After his wife's death, Nikola was shattered. His world had collapsed. The Russian soldiers had not only killed his wife, but also destroyed his unborn child, and burned his home to ashes. Now, Nikola burned with only one desire: revenge. He swore to kill the soldier who had shot his wife. The only way to do that was to join the Ukrainian army. So, right there, Nikola begged the two soldiers, "Please, take me with you. I want to fight for Ukraine." The soldiers saw the fire in his eyes. They agreed, placed him in their vehicle, and drove him to the military base. When they arrived at the base, their commanding officer was furious. Seeing Nikola, he scolded the two soldiers for bringing a civilian and refused to let Nikola enlist. He suspected Nikola might even be a spy, but then Nikola explained everything. Through broken words, He told the officer how Russian soldiers had murdered his wife and burned his home. With tears in his eyes, he said he had no reason left to live, except to fight for his country and take revenge. Hearing this, the officer finally relented. He allowed Nikola to join the Ukrainian army. His training began the very next day. But Nikola was just an ordinary man. Training was brutal. All his life, he had only taught mathematics. He had never even touched a weapon before. When the soldiers were ordered to assemble and disassemble their rifles, Nikola struggled. He was far slower than the others and always finished last. Watching this, the officer shook his head. He believed Nikola would never become a real soldier. But Nikola didn't give up. He kept his focus and pushed himself harder every single day. Nikola didn't let their mockery break him. Instead, he trained even harder. While others slept, he stayed awake, practicing over and over, determined to prove himself. Then one day, the officer gathered the men and announced, "We don't have enough snipers. We must increase our numbers to stand against the Russians. Who among you wants to be a sniper?" A few men stepped forward. Nikola was among them. The soldiers laughed again. To them, Nikola seemed hopeless. The officer confronted him. "You? A sniper? You can barely assemble a gun, let alone master a sniper rifle." But Nikola stood firm. "Give me one chance. I can prove I'll be a great sniper." The officer stared at him, then handed him a rifle. "Fine. You have 20 seconds to assemble this weapon. If you can't, forget about being a sniper." Nikola took the rifle. Then, in a bold move, he tied a blindfold around his eyes. With lightning speed, his hands moved across the weapon. Piece by piece, he broke it down, then reassembled it. When he finished, the stopwatch showed just 18 seconds. The room fell silent. The same men who had mocked him only moments before now stood in awe. They clapped, cheering for Nikola. Even the officer was impressed. For the first time, he saw true potential in this man. Nikola was officially accepted into sniper training. But things weren't easy. While the others were given brand new, modern weapons, Nikola was handed an old, outdated rifle. He protested, asking for better equipment. The officer looked him in the eye and said, "If you want the modern weapons, earn them. Prove yourself first." Nikola had no choice but to accept what he was given. He gripped the old rifle and walked away, determined to make it work. During sniper drills, the officer reminded them, "A true sniper does not move. No matter what happens, no matter what danger comes, he holds his position, eyes fixed on his target." To test this, the officer fired live rounds near the soldiers as they trained. Anyone who flinched, those who failed the sniper drill, were immediately dismissed. But when Nikola's turn came, he did not move an inch. His eyes locked on the target, his body steady as stone. And just like that, Nikola passed the test. The next training was even harder. This time, the snipers were shown their target only once. After that, their eyes were covered with a blackboard, and they had to shoot purely by memory and calculation. Some soldiers managed to pass. But when Nikola's turn came, his shot missed by just a little. He failed the drill. The reason was clear: his weapon was old and unreliable. With that rifle, hitting a perfect shot was nearly impossible. Yet, everyone knew, if Nikola had been given a modern weapon, his shot would have been flawless. The next challenge was the most difficult so far. The snipers had to hit their target in complete darkness, using only the brief flash of a flare for light. The officer fired a flare into the sky, and the men pulled their triggers. One by one, their bullets missed. Not a single soldier hit the target. All except Nikola. He didn't fire when the flare lit up. He knew aiming directly in the sudden light was impossible. Instead, he used the flash to calculate the distance of his target. Then, with his mathematician's mind, he adjusted his aim and fired a perfect shot. The bullet struck dead center. The soldiers were stunned. Even the officer stood in disbelief. This was a task no one had ever completed before, and Nikola had done it. Impressed beyond words, the officer finally gave him the code name he had long desired, Raven. Days turned into weeks. Nikola poured his soul into training, never stopping, never breaking. And then, the moment arrived. The colonel saluted him, declaring that Nikola had officially passed all tests. A few days later, the colonel approached him with new orders. "Pack your gear. You're coming with us. We have a mission." The news was grim. Russian soldiers had captured a Ukrainian checkpoint. This was Nikola's first real operation. The team moved out quickly, taking their positions around the checkpoint. They lined up their scopes, ready to fire. But just as they were about to pull the trigger, a vehicle appeared in the distance, heading toward the checkpoint. The colonel ordered everyone to hold fire. The Russians stopped the car and forced the passengers out. They checked their passports, searched the vehicle, and finding nothing suspicious, allowed them to leave. But before letting them go, the soldiers kept their passports. When the civilians demanded their documents back, the Russians beat them mercilessly. That was the final straw. The colonel gave the order, "Fire." In an instant, every Ukrainian sniper unleashed their bullets. Within seconds, all Russian soldiers at the checkpoint were dead. The mission was complete. When Nikola returned to base, he noticed many of his fellow soldiers were missing. Worried, he asked where they had gone. The colonel told him they had been sent on another mission. The next day, devastating news arrived. Most of those men had been killed by a single Russian sniper. His name was Sergei, the most dangerous marksman in Russia. Days passed, and soon Nikola set out on his next mission with his team. They laid mines across the terrain and took their positions, waiting for the enemy. After some time, the Russian soldiers appeared. But this time, Nikola saw a familiar face among them. It was Evan, the same arrogant boy who used to torment him back in school. Now, Evan had joined the Russian army. The colonel raised his hand, preparing to give the order to fire. Nikola froze. His finger trembled on the trigger. This was his former student. How could he kill him? But the order came. Nikola forced himself to push his emotions aside. Instead of firing directly at Evan, he aimed at the mines they had planted earlier. His shot hit. A deafening explosion ripped through the ground, killing Evan and every Russian soldier around him. When the smoke cleared and silence returned, the colonel turned to Nikola in anger. "What were you thinking? When I gave the order to fire, why did you hesitate?" Nikola lowered his head and answered softly. "Among those Russians was one of my students. I didn't want to kill him." The colonel explained to Nikola that he shouldn't feel any grief over Ivan's death, because here, Ivan wasn't his student, he was his enemy. Ivan had chosen to join the Russian army on his own, and for that reason, Nikola had no reason to mourn him. After completing their mission, the team returned to their base camp. The colonel had complete faith in Nikola. He spent most of his time with him. One day, the colonel showed Nikola a photo of his family and told him there were 3 members in his household. His 2 daughters had no idea that their father was a soldier. "I've told them I'm a businessman," he said, "and my wife has never revealed the truth to them either." Hearing this, Nikola opened up about his own story, how ruthlessly Russian soldiers had murdered his wife. He grew emotional while recalling the tragedy, but the colonel steadied him and kept him focused. The next morning, the unit set out for another mission. This one was critical, as intelligence had reported that a group of Russian soldiers would soon be passing through a certain route. The colonel and Nikola hurried to the location and quickly took their positions. Before long, they spotted 2 Russian soldiers waiting for the rest of their team. As Nikola peered through his scope, he froze. One of those soldiers was the very man who had shot his wife. And right now, that man was directly in Nikola's crosshairs. Nikola requested permission to fire, but the colonel denied it. Rage boiled inside Nikola. His sole reason for joining the army was to avenge his wife's death, and now his target stood right before him. He asked again for permission to fire, but once more, the colonel refused. Unable to control his emotions any longer, Nikola pulled the trigger. His shot struck true, killing the soldier instantly. But this reckless act came at a terrible cost, because now the Russian troops had discovered their position. The colonel turned to Nikola, furious. "What have you done?" And worse, Russia's deadliest sniper, a man known as Siri, had also locked onto their location. The colonel knew Siri was close and began searching for his position. But before he could spot him, Siri's bullet ripped through the air and struck him with a clean headshot. The colonel fell dead on the spot. In that moment, Nikola realized the magnitude of his mistake. His actions had cost the colonel his life. The Russians had now fully zeroed in on their position, and heavy gunfire and bombing rained down on him. Seeing the situation spiral out of control, Nikola decided to retreat. Carrying the colonel's body, he pulled back from his position and fought his way out of enemy territory until he finally made it back to base. Grief weighed heavily on him. Nikola blamed himself for the colonel's death. But in his sorrow, he swore an oath. He would kill Siri and avenge the colonel's death. Soon after, Nikola received intel about 2 Russian snipers. Without wasting a moment, he set out on his next mission. He reached his position, steadied his aim, and eliminated the first sniper. But in the process, a second sniper shot him in the arm. Wounded and bleeding, Nikola still refused to give up. Summoning his strength, he managed to take down the second sniper as well. Severely injured, Nikola retreated to a secret base where he could recover. During this time, he received a call from the army major, who informed him that they had located the sniper who had killed the colonel. Nikola returned to the base, where the major briefed the entire team. He revealed that the sniper's name was Siri, and he was the most feared marksman in all of Russia. His aim had never once missed. Siri had already taken down 6 of Ukraine's most skilled snipers. That's why he could never be underestimated. The major explained that Siri didn't just kill Ukrainian soldiers, he recorded their deaths on video and uploaded them to social media, hoping to break the spirit of the Ukrainian army. Siri was a unique sniper. Unlike most, he rarely changed his position. He preferred to settle into a single location and hunt his enemies from there. So, a plan was made. 2 teams would move in on Siri's position. According to the strategy, the first team would attack the Russian soldiers head-on. While they were distracted, the second team would strike from behind. In that chaos, Nikola would slip into the building and eliminate Siri. Once the plan was finalized, they set out for the location. Upon arrival, every sniper took up their positions, steadying their aim. Meanwhile, Nikola quietly infiltrated the building. Inside, he spotted 2 Russian soldiers lost in conversation. Without wasting a second, Nikola shot them both and pushed deeper into the structure. Then, as planned, he gave the signal. At once, the Ukrainian snipers opened fire, mowing down the Russian troops. Siri soon realized something was wrong. None of his men were reporting back. Suspicion rose in his mind. He climbed up to the rooftop, where another Russian sniper had been stationed. But when he got there, the sniper was already dead. Fear gripped Siri's heart. He knew then, he was surrounded by Ukrainian forces. He radioed for backup, but the response was grim. The reinforcements would take at least 10 more minutes to reach him. Quickly, Siri returned to his position, scanning desperately for the enemy. That's when his eyes fell upon a small statue placed on a table. It was something Nikola had left behind after entering the building, the statue his wife had once given him. Before Siri could make sense of it, Nikola struck. He lunged forward, stabbing Siri repeatedly until he was dead. But the fight had drawn attention. Another sniper in the building grew alert. Before he could react, Nikola hurled a grenade at him. The explosion tore through the room, killing the last sniper instantly. Moments later, the backup team Siri had called finally arrived at the building. But they had no idea their leader was already dead. When they tried to call Siri, it was Nikola who answered. His chilling words came through the line, "You're all about to die." With that, he shot the truck's driver. Gunfire erupted. Russian soldiers leapt from the vehicle, panicked and confused. But they didn't know that Ukrainian snipers were already waiting in ambush. One by one, the Russians were picked off until none remained. A few days later, Nikola visited his wife's grave. He had finally fulfilled the promise he made to her. He had killed every man responsible for her death, and for the colonel's. Standing there, he swore another oath, that he would serve his country until his very last breath. And with that, Nicola walked away. The film ends here. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.